Well, greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Today I have an array of just absolutely terrifying law enforcement and military involved encounters with Dogman. Before we jump into them, a couple links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost you a cent. Click the like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads that I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all of these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. And yes, folks, they definitely do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to today's upload, shall we?
If you've ever been to Marietta, Ohio, perhaps you'd agree that it is a charming but ghostly feel to it. My encounter with a dogman happened while visiting my college girlfriend back in 2006. We were both from Ohio and met while studying at the Great Ohio State University. My girlfriend, who we will call Lauren, knew that I was obsessed with all outdoor activities. So she surprised me with a kayaking trip that was meant to last for a few hours. The day got off to a great start. Things like kayaking always got me into a best mood possible. It was amazing how quickly things could turn back, though. I don't think we had been kayaking for an hour when suddenly we spotted a man in a uniform who was standing alongside the river and waiting for us to get closer so that he could speak to us. He waved us down, so it was immediately evident that whatever he had to say was important. By the time we paddled close enough to him, I could see around the bend that there were armed professionals. At first, it looked like SWAT team members had been called over to respond to some kind of emergency. As I continued to observe the man, I soon realized that they were not police officers at all, but rather military personnel. I was so distracted by the activity that I only gathered bits and pieces of what the forest ranger was saying to us. He said that he would call for someone with a trailer to pick us and the kayaks up, since he was not legally allowed for us to go any further. He also made it very clear that he wasn't permitted to reveal any details to us. It was while Lauren and I had begun to drug the kayaks out of the water that we heard a hair-raising growl, followed by gunfire. The only thing I could assume at the time was that the men had been summoned to track down some aggressive mountain lion or black bear. However, my assumption that they were dealing with an ordinary animal would soon be put to rest. Out of nowhere, an extremely tall, hairy figure came running around the riverbank and was hobbling straight toward we were standing. When looking back on it, something that is a tad humorous was how the ranger ran into the water before instructing us what to do. Naturally, we did the same as him, fully immersed ourselves into the cool water. Although the dogman eyed us as it hobbled onward, it was as if it knew it had no time for us. Of course, I'm so grateful for that, because that thing was fully capable of becoming a killing machine. I cannot imagine any living thing standing a chance at surviving if this creature designated it as prey. I've heard some people say that Bigfoot may be able to hold its own against one of these things, but I've never seen one, so it's hard to imagine anything giving a dogman a run for its money. Tom asked me to provide a detailed description of what the creature looked like, and I think the best way of doing that would be to tell you to go online, look up lichens from the Underworld film series. This thing was just as muscular as those creatures, if not more so. I'm also going to go ahead and say I believe it was taller than any of the creatures in those movies. I hope that whatever I saw was a full-grown adult, because if not, the idea that any land predator could grow larger chills me to my core. I feel like something of that size could be taken down an African elephant single-handedly. I believe that the only reason the creature did not kill every single one of those military men was that it was likely drugged up. I could tell by its body language that this was no unintelligent organism. It wasn't long before the man came around the corner and started firing at the creature. There was no question that they wanted to prevent any more civilians from seeing this thing. I'm not sure whether any bullets penetrated the creature, since it continued to hobble at high speed in the other direction. Just after the creature disappeared from our sights, a black helicopter entered the area and hovered above the nearby woods that the creature had likely entered. Even though the ranger seemed to be almost as shocked by all of this as we were, he warned us that we were going to need to sign a confidentiality agreement form before we permitted to leave the area. He was right. Before the van came to pick us up, along with the kayaks, a man in military fatigues brought out a binder from their vehicle that contained a stack of paper. It was a black binder that looked like it had been around for quite some time. I couldn't help but wonder how many signatures it had inside. Was this ordeal more than a common thing than I would have thought? It all happened so fast that it's hard to give it some storybook ending. They had all our information, and we were expected to remain quiet about it. Lauren is now my wife, and we have told various close friends throughout the years, at least the ones who we suspected would be interested. But I get the feeling that a few of them believe us. I think they believe that something out of the ordinary happened, but it was likely a bear and we mistook it for this mythical beast. Just with so many other reports I've read, the experience gave birth to a new hobby for both Lauren and I. We've calmed down a little bit since then, but there was a time when we were reading, listening to, and watching every piece of Dogman-related content we could get our hands on. When you realize there is so much more to this existence than originally thought, it tends to make life more interesting than it was. At least that's how it was for Lauren and I. However, I can imagine it being suffocating if you're the only one out of everyone you know who has had an encounter with a cryptid. There is no question that this was therapeutic for both her and I to have someone so close to review the event with. I do believe that the whole thing brought us closer, and you wouldn't believe how deep some of the discussions get between us. It feels like we are immersed in this ongoing mystery that will likely never be solved. This next encounter I've shared 2 different times on this channel. It really sets with me because the subscriber who shared it with me chose for me to have it probably a year at least before anyone else. When I first received the email and read the encounter, I was blown away. I've reached out to him several different times. He's responded. He uses a burner email. And it's just one of those, I've had amazing encounters, and please don't think that I'm saying any are better than any are better than others. There's no better encounter. But there are ones that, for one reason or another, stick with me. And I think the fact that this is probably one of the most graphically violent encounters, and that he chose my channel first out of all of the others to share it with. And the reason why he chose to share afterward is because he wanted to get some sort of not feedback, but he was hoping that other people that were there that experienced what he experienced would be in the comment section. So after I share this, I'm going to send him an email and see how he's doing, and maybe I'll get a reply. Hopefully I do. But anyway, let's get into this one. In the first week of May 2020, I had an encounter that I'm still having problems coming to terms with. Due to reasons I will explain in this story, I am not comfortable with giving my name or details of exactly where it happened. I'm a pretty normal guy living in Delaware on the border of the southeastern Pennsylvania. I am a lover of the outdoors. In the past few years, I have not had time to really get out into nature and get my much needed dose of the natural world. In 2019, I opened my own online business, and due to the recent COVID-19 pandemic and the whole world being stuck at home on their computers, my sales tripled the first half of the year. I have 2 children who are very responsible and trustworthy teenagers. My girlfriend works at the local hospital and is considered an essential worker, so the pandemic has kept her very busy this year. I turned 40 this year, and for the first time in my adult life, I had some time on my hands and was itching to get away from civilization. I have an internet hotspot router built into my SUV that works almost anywhere, no matter how remote. So with a laptop, I figured I could work from the road and take a few days to go fishing and breathe some fresh air. Neither of my teenagers were interested in joining me, and like I said, my girlfriend was far too busy with work, so I took my best friend with me, a 120-pound pit bull lab mix named Pete. He makes a great camping dog because he's incredibly lazy, and I never have to worry about him running off to chase deer or anything. He'll just lie on his blanket next to the fire all day and night, unless I make him head out with me. But, as I've learned while camping with Pete, if coyotes, bears, or any other predators come around, he snaps out of that laziness to protect the camp. Despite his easygoing demeanor, Pete is pretty intimidating, as he is 120 pounds of muscle with no fat, which also blows my mind because of how lazy and inactive he is. I try to go camping at least once a year, and when I do, I usually rough it with a small tent and whatever I can carry on my back, but this time I decided I wanted to have as many comforts of home and really pamper myself. So I hitched my 10-foot enclosed cargo trailer to my very large SUV and filled it with all the things that I would really want to be comfy. I brought my full-size backyard grill, a 12x12 pop-up canopy, an air mattress, 2 large coolers filled with food, and fancy 6-person tent. The campground I decided to go to is a large one that is mostly used by RV kind of crowd. But on the far end, right next to the best fishing area, they have a half a dozen of just plain old campsites with no power or water hookups. My campsite was bordered by about 50 yards of thick woods that separated my camp from a large, fast-moving stream that is well known to be one of the best trout fishing spots in the whole state. On the other side of the stream is a steep mountainside that is covered in rocks, overhangs, and small caves. It's a beautiful area. I love falling asleep to the sound of water. I set up camp so that my SUV, trailer, and pop-up canopy kind of make a U-shape and block most of the view into my area from the rest of the campers. I rented my campsite for a full week, starting on Friday, May 1st, which was the first day that the state opened up the state parks and campgrounds to the public since the pandemic shut down. Back in March, I arrived at the campground about midday on Friday. The place was packed. I spent most of the day getting my campsite set up, getting to know my temporary neighbors, and cooking ribeye and burgers and vegetables on the grill. The weather in central Pennsylvania in early May is pretty much perfect, so I decided to sleep in the tent each night with Pete. I turned my trailer into my mobile office where I kept my computer, internet goods, mailing packages, and even a printer for printing postage. This way I could work an hour or so each morning, get my orders packed up, and drive the 20 minutes into the nearest town once every few days to get my orders shipped out. I remember thinking that I wish I could convince my girlfriend and children to just sell everything and move into the woods to live just like this. The weekend was crazy busy at the campground, and the creek was lined with fishermen as far as the eye could see. So I decided to do some hiking and exploring into the surrounding wilderness with Pete instead of fighting 10 people for the same one fish all day. It felt great to get out to where I belong, the woods. The only negative was that it rained on and off all weekend while I was hiking. But to be honest, when you camp in Pennsylvania, you should expect to get rained on regularly. On the afternoon of Sunday, May 3rd, the campground cleared out fast, and by sundown, there were only a few active campsites left. I had gotten to know the two guys in the campsite directly next to mine, so we hung out for a few hours a night while I drank hot tea and they smoked joints like they were cigarettes. Needless to say, they were always hungry and seemed pleased to have me next door with my full-sized grill and enough food to feed a small army. For the next few days, I worked online, fished the creek, explored the mountains on foot with my dog Pete. We also liked to just walk around the campground itself and stop to talk to scattered campers who were there during the weekday. On Tuesday afternoon, a few of them told me about a black bear who had made its way into an accessible side of the campground and raided their camp the night before. This had me a little concerned because I had a full-size grill sitting out in the open at my camp that had been cooking delicious food for days on end. I debated putting the grill inside of my enclosed trailer at night, but laziness got the best of me and I left it out. Central Pennsylvania has a rather large black bear population, and I was already aware of this. So at night I slept with a Mossberg Maverick 88 12-gauge shotgun loaded with double-aught buck in the tent with Pete and I, just in case a rogue bear posed a danger to us. I had forgotten to pack my Ruger Redhawk 44 mag for hiking, so while out in the woods I had to rely on my S&W Shield 45 ACP that I already had on my hip when I left home. It wasn't ideal, but I figured it was better than nothing. On the night of Tuesday, May 5th, my new friends and I cooked up some barbecued chicken thighs, baked beans, baked potatoes wrapped in aluminum foil. They produced a small bottle of vodka as well, and we made a few orange soda spiked drinks to go with our fancy campsite dinner. All the food and drinks combined with too much fun had worn us all out. A little early, so we parted ways and got ourselves prepared to crash for the night, a night that would prove to be the most terrifying night of our lives. 10 p.m. I loaded 4 shells of buck into my shotgun, got in my tent, got it all squared away, lied down in the tent next to my dog Pete. He was lying on his bed and blanket. I put some Citizen Journalist news on my phone, and put one headphone in my right ear and kept the left clear to listen to the surroundings, to enjoy the sounds of nature. My tent was pitched close to the tree line with the rear of the tent facing the woods. The noise of the frogs and insects that night were super loud, kind of a song that put me to sleep better than any lullaby ever could. The next thing I remember was waking up and my eyes popping open to some kind of hollow metallic noise outside of my campsite. I lied there perfectly still with my heart slamming from a quick spike of adrenaline that flooded my veins. Then bang! I heard the lid on my grill slam shut. I had stuck a fairly bright solar-powered motion light on the side of my trailer that lit up my small U-shaped courtyard area of vehicles and tents. My tent was facing the open part of the U, and I could see that my motion light was on, and someone or something was moving around my camp casting shadows as it went. I looked at Pete to my right, and he was still lying down, but his head was up and his eyes were as big as ping pong balls. He was clearly hearing what I was hearing. But I found it strange that he was so silent. It was right then and there that I noticed the usual deafening noise of frogs and insects in the woods behind me. Not there. Then I heard whatever it was breathing. It was a hoarse, deep breathing. And that was when I thought to myself, my God, a bear. I could hear it walking around, thump, thump, thump. And next I heard it at my trailer, pulling at the side door, trying to get inside. So I sat there and grabbed my shotgun. One thing about black bears is that they are not the bravest animals, and any man-made noise will almost always make them run for their lives. So I racked the slide of my shotgun as loud as I could and chambered around. Instead of running off, the creature stopped moving and went silent. I could feel the fear building up inside of me as I pretty much held my breath and listened. To my horror, it started walking toward my tent. It was then that I saw its shadow take shape as it drew closer. It was on 2 feet and apparently huge. I sat there in terror and disbelief as it came right up to the front of my tent, breathing like a giant monster. I said out loud, "Whoever you are, I have a 12 gauge pointed right at you, so you better sound off who you are." Right then it leaned forward right up to my tent and let out the most terrifying and deep growl I had ever heard in my life. At that moment, Pete whined softly and cowered his head down. It was then that the shadow of its head was clearly visible. It had a giant head of a wolf with 2 pointed ears. As it was growling at me, I could hear my neighbors talking to each other, and one of them shined a flashlight at the creature. When the light hit the side of the creature's face, I saw the eyes light up a golden LED light. It turned its face toward the flashlight, and I could hear the man gasp and say, "Holy shit!" Then it turned its attention back to me and growled again. Decided that if I didn't do anything, that this thing was going to kill us. So I lied back onto my sleeping pad, took aim at the shadow of this creature's head, and pulled the trigger. What followed was complete and total pandemonium. The monster screamed and roared at the same time. It was like the death scream of a woman mixed with the roar of a large lion. Pete finally snapped out of his fear, jumped up, and started barking ferociously. The thing ran off, and from what I could tell from the loud thump, it ran straight into my trailer. I clambered up and quickly unzipped my tent and poked my head outside to see. It had gotten up on its feet and then ran straight into the picnic table and did a flip onto the ground. It started grabbing its face and thrashing around. I could see that there was blood everywhere on my trailer. I jumped out of the tent while chambering another shell. I aimed as best as I could, with my whole body shaking violently. And right as it started to get up again, I shot it a second time. I'm not entirely sure that I hit it with the second shot. It stood straight up and I pumped the gun and shot again. The third shot dropped it again. I was so terrified and taken back at how tall it was when it stood up that I tripped over my own feet and fell backwards. Just then I heard more gunfire erupt from behind me and turned to see my neighbor unloading a huge revolver into this werewolf-looking thing, maybe 20 yards away. The creature was on its side and was kind of running in circles in the ground, gurgling and spraying blood from its face and neck as it gasped. As it was doing its death spiral on the ground, it was moving closer to me, so I tried to pump the gun again and was shaking so bad that it took 3 attempts before the last shell chambered. I just pointed and shot without aiming and could see the hump on its back of its neck rip open and spray blood and flesh everywhere. I was really close to it at this point. The creature stopped flipping out and its limbs were just twitching while its head remained fully animated and flopping back and forth for at least another few 10 seconds. I crawled quickly backwards away from it, tried to stand up. I realized once I stood up that I'd been holding my breath the whole time, and when I got to my feet, my vision started to go black and I fell over again. My new friend ran up and grabbed my arms and started pulling me hard backwards away from the creature. I stood up shaking badly and looked at the guy with the revolver. His eyes were huge and full of terror. When I started looking around, there were at least another 5 people showing up with the same wild-eyed expression. I saw that at least 3 of them had come over with their guns. People were yelling and asking each other what had happened and checking to see if I was injured because I had blood on my clothes and my face. It all happened quickly, but as often told by people facing traumatic events, it seemed to me like it was in slow motion. My dog was still barking and going crazy, so I did my best to calm Pete down. When I hugged him, he was shaking as much as I was. Before long, a small crowd had formed and people were on their phones calling 911. After a minute or so, a few guys and myself approached the thing. It lay there, still occasionally twitching. We all stood over it, saying, "What is that?" over and over. Eventually, we all started saying "werewolf" in disbelief. All at once, people started taking pictures with their phones, but mine was still in my tent. The Wolfman was dead. The top half of its head basically gone, including both of its eyes, the top of its snout. I assume that was the first shot I made from the tent. The front of its neck was completely shredded, and the back of its neck was missing a large chunk of meat. Other than that, it was pretty much impossible to see exactly what other injuries it had sustained, as it was completely covered from head to toe in blood. But we were all pretty sure that it had taken buckshot or .357 Magnum to the chest as well. There was a small river of blood running through the camp right past my tent from a puddle that surrounded the beast. It was a lot of blood. It was on its side, and after a few minutes we summoned the courage to grab some large sticks and flip it onto its back. It most definitely was a male, as it had a huge set of balls bigger than my fists. It was huge. We never measured it, but it was longer than any man I had ever seen. It had dog-like legs and weird-shaped paws with kind of small heels for feet. Looking back, I'm impressed that it was able to balance such a big body on feet so small. It had really skinny lower legs and pretty thick upper ones. It had arms pretty much like human with long fingers that had filthy-looking claws, maybe 3 to 4 inches long. I noticed it was missing the top half a finger from its battle. The second wave of terror hit us all at once. The howling of multiple animals sounded off in the direction of the mountain behind the creek. We all looked at each other, and I could see that same big-eyed look go over everyone's face. I ran to my tent and clumsily loaded my shotgun with full 5 rounds this time, grabbed my .45 as well, and clipped it to my side inside my waistband. I also grabbed my phone. All of a sudden, everyone was done looking at the werewolf and was looking into the woods in the direction of the howling. It kept up a few minutes, and we could hear the howling getting further and further away. The police, game wardens, paramedics showed up all at once. I could see from the flashing lights that they had blocked the entrance to the campground up at the hill off to the distance. The cops were just as surprised and freaked out as we were when they first saw this creature. The 2 game wardens looked worried, not surprised. They told everyone not to take any pictures and made everyone clear the general area. The wardens were both on their phones almost the whole time from then on. Paramedics cleared everyone and tried to get me to agree to go to the hospital to get checked out, but I refused. The only injury I had was to my hearing, as I was half deaf for a few days after all the gunfire and noise. The paramedics were also very silent and looked worried, much like the game wardens. The police took my shotgun and the revolver from my neighbor. They let me keep my .45. They made everyone else put their guns away, and anyone who was there was rounded up for questioning. Everyone was told to stay off their phones, which was not much of a problem, as only a few people's phones got signal at the campground. When I asked the game wardens what the hell this thing was, they told me they didn't know, but it looked like some kind of mutant bear or large canine. A few hours later, an SUV full of guys showed up. They were all carrying large Glocks, dressed in cargo pants and t-shirts. They immediately took me and the others who were involved aside and began questioning us. They told me that they were with the Federal Fish and Game. They were very interested in the howling we had heard after the battle occurred. They must have asked me 10 times about where it was, how close it sounded, and what it sounded like. They also repeated to me 100 times that I was not to tell anyone what had happened, and that they would get to the bottom of things, find out what I had encountered. They told me to tell anyone who asked about my trailer that I had to shoot an aggressive black bear. I assume they told my neighbor and anyone else who was on the scene to say the same thing. They made us open our phones. They went through our photos, deleted the pics any of us had taken. They also told me that if any pictures were to come out of this creature, that would spell trouble for anyone who had them. They threatened me with all kinds of trouble if this got out. They did not try to pretend that I was seeing things. They just point blank and politely asked me not to talk about it and to lie about the trailer damage. It would seem that I was asleep for only 2 hours before the Dogman showed up. By about 4 a.m., the officials had already gotten to everyone in the campground, and I assumed the other people were told it was a bear and made to pack up and get ready to go. They said it was not safe, and they had to close the campground until they were sure it was safe. After the Dogman was bagged and tagged, a small fire truck was brought in, and all of the blood was hosed off of my trailer, vehicle, tables, everything else, and the blood on the ground was hosed into the woods behind my tent. Then a few guys wiped my trailer down and the vehicle with soapy water and hosed it off again. Regular old duct tape was put over the holes in my trailer. They took my tent, bloody clothes, bloody slippers as evidence, along with my shotgun. Right before I left, they gave me back my shotgun, wiped down and unloaded. They told me to fill my tank at the closest town and drive straight home without stopping. They repeated this 3 times to me. Since all of this, I have learned everything I can about what I encountered. I listen to Dogman and Wolfman encounters daily and at night, and that is how I came across your channel. I figured I'd reach out to you. I am amazed that the authorities are able to keep such a noisy event with so many witnesses under wraps. I have been searching for anyone who came forward or anything about campground closing in the news. Nothing. I am not interested in putting myself out there any more than this, just for now. I'm almost as scared of the agents as I am the Dogman, but all in all, they seem genuinely concerned for my well-being. Then I get a second email. I trust that you're a good person and all, but I fear that they may have been watching you due to your uploads I have listened to about that guy named Victor. I find it interesting that the one agent that really had me cornered for a while that night had a thick southern accent. I suppose he came from your friend's Virginia group. I will see if I can put together an online phone number and call you with a proxy server. I'm sorry for the paranoia, but life has been going very well with the exception of this encounter. I am terrified of those guys, agents, screwing my life up. I can't afford for things to go sideways for my family right now. My state of mind is pretty jumpy these days. I won't even take my trash cans out without my revolver. If I do set up together to call you, what is the best time? If you have any questions in the meantime, go ahead and email me. I will make sure to check this account each day. Then the third email. I was reading through the comments on your show of my story. A few people had questions, it seems. No, none of the guys in the Denali had long guns, just large Glocks. I asked the older southern gentleman what kind, and he said a Glock 20 10mm. I really didn't give all that much detail in the description of the monster looking back in my email to you, Jeff. The dead Dogman smelled terrible, like a combination of barnyard animal mixed with a strong scent of dog piss. Also, it had a tail, a small tail, maybe 2 feet, the longest, The Dogman was dark brown all over. Oddly enough, I do remember that it had some lighter brown stripes on its arms where the blood wasn't totally soaked in the upper arm area. It was fluffy with fur, not the sparse, hairy thing I hear others talk about in their encounters. This one was fully covered in fur like an actual dog, even its arms and legs. But when it stood up in front of me, it did seem to have some white in the middle of its chest. I could be wrong because I only saw it that way for a second. The next time I saw its chest, it was covered completely in blood. The skin on the tip of its snout and under its bottom jaw were both sheared off with buckshot, but its teeth were undamaged. As it lay there, it had its mouth open, and its teeth were very weird. All of them were pointed and seemed like they would fit together like a shark's teeth or an alligator. The teeth were bloody, but very visible. They seemed unnatural to me. My college major involved the study of teeth and fossils, so I have a good understanding in tooth structure and which type of teeth are designated for what. And it would seem that its teeth would only be used for biting large chunks of flesh off and swallowing them whole like a shark or a gator. They were not reminiscent of normal canine teeth in any way. After listening to hundreds of encounters the past few months, a common theme is that they seem to like the softer inner organs of their prey, while often leaving the meat behind. I wonder if that's because it's easier to swallow their food in large chunks, and obviously softer organs would be much easier than dealing with bone and tougher muscle. Just a thought. This is going to sound a bit silly, but I just have to say it. There was a feeling of something supernatural from the beginning. I can't describe it, but the feeling of something supernatural was in the air, even when I thought it was a bear. It's like everything felt wrong and reality had ceased to exist for a moment. How would every frog and insect for hundreds of yards know to be quiet? Why would a land animal like a dogman have teeth like an alligator or a shark? How did it keep flipping out and running around with its brains falling out of the top of its head? The very air around me felt like it had a weird charge. I feel like there is something important about these creatures that we just don't quite understand. Something supernatural. Give me some time. I will get a Skype number together this week or next week and give you a call. What's a good day for you? Fourth email. I've been having weird things going on. Someone's been calling my phone from different international numbers and hanging up on me after 10 seconds of silence. I can tell it's a landline by the noise it makes when they hang up. It also lets me know that it's an actual person and not a robocall. A black SUV with a guy who wears a headset with a microphone was outside of my house in early morning. He leaves right before 6:30, right about the beginning of rush hour. Yesterday, a white Range Rover pulled into my driveway in the middle of the day. I happened to be working in my kitchen when it happened. I was facing the window when they did. I saw the two guys in the vehicle sitting there, scanning my home, talking to each other. I always carry a gun now, even when I'm in the home alone with the kids. So I popped the button on my holster, securing the strap, and went out the front door and quickly exited. The two guys looked at me and casually pulled out of my driveway. I did notice that they had out-of-state plates because it was just a white plate, definitely not Delaware. I'm sorry for this, Jeff, but I'm going to have to stop corresponding for a while. I can't help but notice that stuff is starting to happen after contacting you. I could just be paranoid, but like I told you previously, I have a happy, almost perfect life right now. I have a lot to lose. I hope you understand. Feel free to let your listeners know. Then, guys, almost a year went by. This encounter happened in May of 2020. I emailed him in February. Hey, it's Jeff Nadolny. How are you? I'm reaching out to make sure you're okay. I'd love to speak with you sometime, and of course would honor the stipulations. I receive an email back a couple days later. I am fine. I have not seen anything weird or had any men in black types watching me for a while now. I have made up my mind to not do any kind of interview or talk directly with anyone for their safety as well as my own. I am still shocked that none of those pictures taken that night slipped out through the cracks and have come online. I've made up my mind to send my encounter to numerous cryptid channels to give it more exposure to your peers and their listeners. I have to think that more than one person out there that night had gone online looking to see if the story had made it into the world beyond the campsite experience. If so, I'm hoping that someone with more balls than me found a way to hide a few pics or a few minutes of video from the guys in the SUV, and will be anonymously leaking them out somehow. Thanks for doing your part to spread the word of my encounter, as well as many others. If I had not had experienced that, I would certainly have looked at the stories like those on your channel ridiculous. But I would imagine that with real-life monsters roaming into the populated campsites and neighborhoods, that the government would indeed have to have some kind of task force to deal with them. So don't worry about me. I'm fine, and let's hope someone else has a few pics that can break this thing wide open. Now, like I said, guys, no encounter is better than any. It doesn't matter if you've seen one from a distance or, like this, you've had point-blank range shootout with one. You're seeing and interacting with something that is told to us since we were children that do not exist. They don't exist, guys. Their monsters aren't real. Yet, they are, and they're out there, and they stalk humanity. Why? Because maybe, just maybe, like I've said many times over, and the more I start thinking about this theory, the more it starts making sense. Now, they really enjoy messing with us. It seems like they love to just, honestly, do we know that Dogman would have attacked him and Pete in the tent that night? We don't. We can only assume, right? But if you think about some encounters that people have had, these creatures like to go up and scare people, smile, growl, walk off, cause some minor damage and walk off. I really think they like to mess with us, but they can hunt us easily. It almost really kind of, to me, points to, and I've said it a couple times, that I really honestly am starting to believe that the Sasquatch and Dogman are possibly somehow related, whether it be through evolution, years and years and years, just different little things. Just because they look like a dog doesn't mean they're a dog. If you see a zebra at night, but you don't see its stripes, just because it looks like a horse at night doesn't mean it's a horse during the day, right? To me, that sounds logical. If you think evolution, supposedly, we are all, some genetic connection. Monkeys have tails. Dogman has tails. They're very large, bipedal, 5 fingers. I've heard some have 6, but some people have 6 fingers too. So I really, the more and more I think about it, I really think that these creatures are related direct ancestors of Neanderthal, and we are direct ancestors of paleo human. It's just, I really think there was a cutoff because Neanderthal used to hunt us back in the day. I really truly think that they were hairy. I mean, I've talked about, not given you guys, I'm sorry. I've discussed and read scientific documents stating that, these Neanderthals stalked the earth at night, hunting humans, hunting other animals. They had slit-like eyes that glowed in the dark or when light hit them. They had a elongated snout. It's called a Neanderthal snout. And their intelligence. Neanderthal wasn't a dumb creature. I mean, compared to us modern humans, yes. But back then, no. So, tactfully, how they hunt was brilliant. I mean, they almost wiped us out, and there's proof of that. Thank God they didn't, but it almost happened. Today's final encounter. To start, my father and grandfather have both passed. I am 81 years old myself. This story was passed on from my dad to me, my granddad having passed when I was only 3. My dad and I had been to my granddad's old homestead many times, but it wasn't until I was 12 or so, as I recall, that one day while we were up there a few days, my dad walked me through what happened to my granddad in the late 1800s. By way, this homestead or house was 15 by 20 foot shack with 2 holes in the side that were windows covered by boards on hinges that could be opened and latched. There were no screens. The door was built out of planks with a latch on the outside and a plank across the inside to keep anything from pushing in the door. There was a small potbelly stove in the corner, the chimney of which my dad had repaired when I was younger on the outing. On this particular day, my dad and I were shooting some cans with a .22. When out of the blue, he starts telling me that my granddad shot some sort of creature here many years ago. I had no idea what he was talking about and began to ask him questions. He told me that my granddad had first encountered this creature spying on him through the trees and brush, not knowing exactly what it was, causing no harm to him, just left him alone. He told my dad that over time this creature started throwing sticks at him when he was around, but never came into open to be fully seen. He said that over time this creature had started becoming more aggressive, showing itself to my grandfather from a distance, grunting, growling, making gestures with its body. My grandfather had gone out hunting one day, returning to the cabin in the afternoon to find the front door broken in and the stovepipe ripped from the stove. He said that the pipe, which wasn't that strong, had been smashed up and crinkled beyond repair, my grandfather having decided at this point to do something about it. In the weeks following, the creature was slapping the outside of the cabin at night. He could smell the creature when it was there, saying that it smelled very badly. My dad said that he owned an old Henry rifle, which he had kept loaded alongside his bed, expecting fully to use it when the time was right. One morning, a loud howl woke my grandfather up. Coming outside the cabin, the windows could only be opened from the outside, and he couldn't see out. Shy of opening the door, which he did, as he cautiously opened the door, about 30 yards in front of him stood this creature, this beast, which upon seeing him started to romp around, throwing its hands in the air and growling at him. My grandfather raised his rifle and shot the creature, knocking him down to the ground. Within seconds, my dad said the creature leapt to its feet, running into the woods, never to be seen or heard again. This was told to me in the 50s. Long before any talk about cryptids, These creatures have been around a lot longer than most choose to believe, in my opinion. And who knows how many people have encountered them throughout the centuries, the likes of which we will never know.
And there you have it, folks, today's upload, which I do hope you all enjoyed as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. After all, it is your support that keeps this channel growing and going, and what gives folks like all of us a place to share our experiences and theories judgment-free. Everyone, please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, our pets, family, and friends. These creatures are real. They are out there. These events happened. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and God bless.